But big picture, these timelines, we're seeing a convergence, whether it be planetary, timeline, political, anything. We're seeing a convergence to something that's happening in the next decade. And like you mentioned earlier, like we thought these things would take time, but they're going faster. They're happening like birth pains. It's coming faster and faster and faster. And you just figure out what's the new normal, and all of a sudden there's another change. Right. And now it's just happening so quick we can't even keep up with it, like AI.
And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Jeff Raymond here, Eden Growth Systems. You know, I have one of the towers right in my house here, and we want to continue conversations. There was so much positive feedback last time talking about how we see the future, which really is aligning with a lot of other people saying, you know, hey, we're seeing the same things with the food shortages, with the ability to tell you that you can't go outside because it's too hot. And we were talking about these, you know, next step of what was planned on the planet here based on the climate. And it does seem already coming to fruition. And that's crazy because it's only been a few weeks since we had the conversation, and now it's out in front of you, like multiple news stories saying, oh, you got to stay on hot. We got to lock down. You can't go to the parks. It's too hot. And we just spoken about this weeks ago. I was thinking it would take at least months to manifest, but you know, here we are. So we wanted to get back together again, try to pull into prophecy, some scripture into today's events, along with talking about the Grow Tower and the loss of crops and fruits. I mean, you know, bringing it indoors, the next logical choice to protect the environment, control the environment, and then, like we did in the old days, circle the wagons for a better term. But anyway, Jeff, thanks for joining me, and I know this is going to be a good one. So everybody buckle up and harness shoulder straps in place, because here we go.
Here we go. Yeah. Thanks, David, for having me on. As always, it's great talking to you. And I know, like, as we've known each other since I started my channel, The Real Martian, and been trying to figure out how to grow food for people, I've been asked, you know, why did you start doing what you're doing at Eden right now? And the answer has been, it's the truth is, and it hasn't changed, is as a Christian, I'm sitting there one night with my wife, and every night we're praying, you know, giving thanks for food and all that. And I always said the same prayer. It's like, and Lord, please help those attain food who do not have any. And I've been doing that for years. And this is about 10 years ago, maybe. And I heard him say, like, one of those voices you just hear and you're like, this is not me speaking. And he's like, Jeff, I've given you an education. I've given you experiences. You know, why don't you go do something about it? And I think that's one of the criticisms a lot of people have of people of faith is like, well, you pray a lot, you know, why don't you go do something? And there's some, praying is super powerful, but doing is also, God gave you hands, feet, and a brain to go do something. And so he challenged me on that and said, you know, go look at my word, go see what's out there and start doing something about it. So I did. I opened up the book and I started reading, and, you know, they say never start reading from the back of the Bible, but I did a long time ago, many, many years. That started me on my journey. And Revelation has always been something that has, you know, I've been very curious about prophecy. There's so many people arguing over it these days, but there's some really simple things here. And when you start looking at the beginning of everything, which I don't mean the beginning of every single thing, so don't take me literally, those that are scholars here, but let's look at some trends. You know, we're looking at the original first seals. You got the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls in Revelation, and people argue over sequence and all this stuff. I'm not here to do that. But if you just look at what it says, you know, the seal here, the third seal is opening, and what they're saying is a quart of wheat for a denarius. So that's like a day's worth of wages, you know, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine. And a lot of people, myself included, take this to be inflation, you know, a large economic event where the price of goods, especially food, just goes through the roof. But it's balanced with the fact that it says this, do not harm the oil and wine. Well, in the old days and even today, it's like, who can afford oil? Who can afford wine? We're talking, you know, not petroleum. We're talking about olive oil, the type of cooking oils. And those are normally for rich people. So it's an interpretation. But what it's saying here is that food prices are going to skyrocket. And then when we see the next one here, the fourth seal, we see famine coming in.
Jerome Powell and the Fed raised rates for the 11th time in July. The Hill warned it's a mistake that could spark a recession. Economists believe this is the last rate hike in the most aggressive rate hike cycle in history. In fact, most economists are forecasting rate cuts in 2024. That's why bullish sentiment in gold for hedge funds just hit an 18-month high. Same could be said for the bullish sentiment on silver, which has risen at its fastest pace in 5 years. JP Morgan sees gold prices at record highs in 12 to 18 months. Rate hikes are typically headwinds for gold. Meanwhile, gold has gone up over 20% since 2022. Imagine where gold and silver are going to go when the Fed stops raising and starts cutting. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention the Adapt 2030 channel. They're going to give you some great service. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. Also, Patriot Gold Group, Consumer Affairs top-rated IRA gold dealer 6 years in a row. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video.
But that's not it. I mean, we got to go to the horse's mouth, right? So we go over to Jesus, and he's saying we're going to have nation going war against nation, and there will be famines and earthquakes, right? And Mark is a backup to that, as well as that there's going to be more famines. Like, it's famine. They're coming after the food. Satan's going after the food. And that's another one of those we were talking before, it's like people who say today, if you're one of these people who go, I just don't understand what's going on, let me just shake you up here a little bit. Is good versus evil, just like it was written down. The book is coming to life, and it all makes perfect sense when you open this thing up and see it. But I say all that to say this, is that I started my journey with Eden because of what was written down here. And I needed to use what I have to be able to help people through what I see as coming. So my goal in talking to you and others is just to wake people up. Even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't believe in Jesus, if you don't think there's one way, that's fine. Guess what? It's all still happening. We're still having famines. We're still seeing people starve. So even if you're not religious, or, I'm not a religious person, I don't believe in doing stuff just to check a box. I actually feel it. I discuss things with Jesus. It's real. It's a real relationship. But let's say you're not any of that. That's cool. Before you get saved, get on the right bus here, but it's still happening, and you can't stop that. So I think a lot of people, I just want to wake them up, David. Even if they don't buy a tower or anything like that, I just want them to understand you need to start doing stuff with food. And that's why I love talking to you, is you've been saying that as part of the mini Ice Age conversations for over a decade. I think you've been working on it. Before you're back in the States, you were still going over all this, is that it's food. Like, we need to get people woken up and get them back on the food train. So I'm sitting here coming at it from my faith perspective, and I just see it written down clearly that we need to start doing these things. And that's why I started Eden, and that's resulted in the Grow Towers, because we wanted to be able to have people actually be able to grow food in places where they couldn't normally grow food. And so that's been a big deal for us. And let's see here.
Yeah, I was wondering more about can you kick on to some Revelation scripture? And I do have some numbers for you. It was 248 grains of wheat that it would equal a denarius. There's been a lot of study, and a lot of people would say, well, is that the shekel? Because, the 248 grains of wheat was also referenced for a shekel. So then you're trying to do a shekel denarius conversion. So there's been a lot of historians coming back and trying to do the mathematics. All right, what does a quart of barley really weigh? Were they doing it by the quart, or were they doing it by the grains? Because, everything seemed to be grain based in terms of the size of the grains themselves weighed and stacked up. Now, here's another thing for those of you who don't understand monetary evolution from that time. It was the food that equaled the silver weight. That's how valuable it was. It's not the other way around. It's not the silver was the main thing to equal the food weight.
Yeah, we measure
the opposite
value
in the famine.
Measuring value, it become, in the world that we live today, silver, gold, all those things important, especially financially setting yourself up. I know you have sponsors and everything, and it's a really good financial move. I'm not a financial advisor, so don't do what I say. I take risk and do startup life. But if we look at value of humans, You know, when it really comes down to it, you can't eat silver. You can't eat gold. You can try it, but it ain't gonna bring you the nutrition you're hoping. You'll be high in metal, but you won't be high in calories. And they're setting yourself up financially, which is a great thing to do. But when it comes down to it, when it really matters, you're going to be worried about food, water, shelter, and your family.
Security.
Security, yeah. And those are the things that are ultimately, it's all going to be breaking down. And I think a lot of us, we spoke last time about this cloak of comfort, and I'm guilty of it. I'm pretty sure if all of us really look at it, is we're like, yeah, I live a life of comfort and I don't want to lose that. So I tend not to look at things, hear no evil, see no evil, because if I start looking and actually acknowledge what's going on, I might wake up and start doing something differently. It gets scary. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of pressure in this world today. And I think a lot of people just don't want to, grab a hold of that. But I think one of the things you've spoken about a lot is community. If we can get people together, if we can wake them up, if we can talk about the mini ice age conversations like what you've done, and right or wrong, bringing people back together again, get the politics out of it and just say, hey, I'm a neighbor, you're a neighbor, I'm a human, you're a human, let's figure this out and talk about the basics. We can find a lot of things that we have in common still, but that cloak of comfort makes it to where we don't want to do that. And people use the fear of the loss of that comfort to pin us against each other, so that instead of building community, what you see is isolation. And I know last time we were talking about the hamster wheel, they're trying to get people into the cities to where they essentially just get you locked up in your little apartment on a hamster wheel, and they isolate you from everybody else. That is what this anti-human thing that we're experiencing. It's Satan. He's coming after us. He hates all of us. The best thing that he can do is make God's children have pain, because he knows that hurts God. And I mean, you see that. You see it happening. It's like Satan's trying to convince everybody that we're animals. You're just an animal. It's just, you go do whatever you want, man. You're just an animal. Like, we're not. We have flesh, but we have more to us. And I think innately everybody knows that. There's more going on here than just eating, drinking, and being merry, because tomorrow you die. There's something else happening. And when I look at this, I see it as a mission that, God literally whacked me up alongside the head and he said, you need to help wake people up about food. You need to help people have ways to grow their own food indoors. So, we created the Eden Tower. We started with the Hab, the Real Martian, my channel, and Wrangler Star launching us. And so grateful to Cody and his wife for getting us started. And that allowed me to meet you and meet others. And through that journey, we've raised rainbow trout indoors. We've done aquaponics. We've done hydroponics. We've done aeroponics. We've done anaerobic digestion, recycling nutrients, or organics into their nutrient components, solar panels, wind. And we did what everybody thought you should be doing, and learned all the lessons, like solar panels don't work in the snow. It's kind of hard. So you're going to need something to burn. And when you look at the world around you and they're trying to make it illegal to burn natural gas for heating, and you should all be solar and wind, well, that's anti-human. It's just flat out dumb. I mean, you could just go and watch my channel and you could see me out there, with a foot of snow, and that's just one day trying to get the snow off the panels, and it just doesn't work. So we were trying to come
too there because too much snow load on it.
Oh, huge. Yeah, big time. We had a passive solar greenhouse and all that. And that's actually, it's interesting you bring it up, because I look at all the people that have greenhouses where I live. I live up in the mountains, about 2,400 feet in the West Coast. And all the greenhouses, the plastic, pretty much all of them is just off. And so what you see is people go get the greenhouses, but then the weather comes, the ice, the snow, and they just collapse, or, they just wear out. And so we were given a whole bunch of different challenges when I left my job and started working with Eden. And we were going to build the next iteration of the Hab that wouldn't collapse under the snow. And then we tried to get our permits for it. County's like, oh, that's great. We're going to love doing this. Really cool county I live in. But they're like 6 months. And I'm like, oh, I don't have 6 months. I'm living off of savings here. So we pivoted to a mobile version, which we call LifePod, 54-foot trailer. I'm hacking on it, bought it, going to put all the stuff into it, snow or doing it during the winter. It's snowing outside. And then COVID hit, right? And all of our investment went boom. So we pivoted to something inside of it, which was these grow towers, and they just took off. So, they're not perfect for every single person, but some of the stuff that they can do, you can grow, it's the only tower you can grow fish in or do hydroponics. We've done giant freshwater prawns in them. They grow. I like them. They taste good. You could do tilapia or even goldfish or stuff like that. We use, instead of using rockwool, we actually use a substance. It's Oasis horticubes. I'll just try sharing my screen here again.
Hey, while you're pulling that up, let me ask a question about the Solex versus 6 millimeter poly. I mean, you're looking at Solex, which is expensive per square foot, but if you're going to lose your greenhouse 3 or 4 times over as punch throughs on snow or hail, really, what do you think the value is on that of going Solex first versus just trying to repair the plastic every time you have a wind event, a snow event, a hail event, or what we're seeing now, atmospheric rivers from the sky event? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when it comes to choosing your building materials, I'm not totally familiar with Solex, but I can definitely speak to like the
It's a honeycomb,
uh,
different, multi-layered plastic that allows sunlight to come through it, and you can get it in different R values as well. But it's a honeycomb lattice that is
oh, okay,
incredibly rigid.
yeah. The semi-rigid panels I've looked at, I had a different name for them, but and there's like a triple pane, double pane
Right.
version of it. Yeah, those definitely, I think those are a good way to go longer term, but your capex up front. I mean, that's the thing is, it's all about money in the end. I hate that. Honestly, I hate money nowadays. It's just becoming such a horrible thing. But your capital, your investment up front is where you really get your long-term savings. And what I mean by that is if you look at what I did on the Hab, I was trying to go as cheap as possible with what I was trying to do. And I could have went smaller and saved money, but that wasn't what I was trying to do. So I got this, single panel of plastic, and I went with PVC, the vinyl coated PVC or PVC coated vinyl. Yeah, super strong. It's like they make swim pools out of it, and I thought that was the way to go. But the R value sucked. So then I had to buy insulation, and the insulation I bought was part of why it collapsed. It created an offset of forces in the Hab, but if I would have spent more money up front, I would have saved that money in the long run. Because if you're gonna do anything with winter growing, which is the key, thing while you have a greenhouse and protecting you from the weather, you're gonna want to have a good R value right up front, and that means you're going to be spending some money. So, but if you spend your money here, you're going to save it on the back end because no matter how you do your greenhouse, usually, especially if you're in deep winter, you're going to be burning propane or natural gas. I've done the wood thing. You can see me in a hole that I dug. I put the 55-gallon drum down in the hole and was heating the ground and trying to do all that. I've looked at geothermal, but to like heat a greenhouse for real, you need a lot of geothermal that goes into that. And there's some really good, like the earth ships and all that, the stuff that people have done, great stuff. But you spend the money up front. You're going to spend the money up front to do that. And so when it comes to your outside skin and what you choose, I think some key things you want to look at is UV resistance and how long is it going to last, because that sun is a real bugaboo and it really can shorten the life of whatever you do. Your R value is the most critical thing if you're doing winter growing of any kind. And I really encourage the Chinese greenhouse designs. I think you had somebody that you've worked with before, but I also had ones that I've talked to, is that passive solar greenhouse, the half circle, where you have your north side is filled with the heat retention, usually like either tires filled with dirt or 55-gallon drums filled with water, all painted black, or even better would be a dirt berm where you have a lot of thermal mass. Anyway, the whole point is your heating and your UV resistance, your R value, and then just how you're going to heat the darn thing. And believe it or not, cooling in the summer is a big deal. So you got to have fans on there. But that was a long answer to, I think that triple pane, the double, I wouldn't go triple, that's way too expensive, but the double pane that you're looking at, those are good things to be able to do. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. Because the Amish here, they cut their logs like 3 feet long, and they have these big old burners that they throw the logs into and keep their greenhouses going all winter long. Because originally when we drove up, they had these 3 foot long pieces that were split log, and I was like, don't learn, that's not for their inside, cook stoves inside. That was for the big boilers outside in a greenhouse.
Oh man, and another thing, like the wood boilers, that's another thing they're going after. I mean, more and more states are starting to make that illegal. It's just back to that anti-human thing. You're seeing anything that has to do with you being able to grow your own food or take care of yourself, even with like cooking food, is under attack. And it's under attack just from the government, but also like all the stuff that's coming in the atmosphere. Like we saw the Ohio train wreck, and we see more of these types of things happening where the poisons are being dumped into the world. And the interesting thing is, I was watching something the other day, David, and it was the extremes that everybody is getting into, and what I mean, and how they don't listen to each other because they're so extreme. So on like one side is, if you start talking about how people are poisoning the planet and doing all these things, you're an environmental extremist. You got to have climate lockdowns, and they just put you in that bucket because that's what everyone's being told. And if you sit there and be like, I think we actually need some fossil fuels still, because you can't have solar when the sun is out or sun is blocked. They're like, oh, you're a capitalist pig and all you care about is money and petroleum and you're on the side. It's like the reality is that if you rape the planet and you suck all the nutrients out of soil, that's a bad thing. You don't have to be an environmentalist to figure that one out. And if you dump a bunch of freaking chemicals on your food, you're going to have some health problems. There's nothing environmental extremist about it. It's called being a realist. And on the other side, you're not some capitalist pig if you're sitting there going, how am I going to heat and cool, or how am I going to heat my home in the middle of winter when the sun's not out? I need petroleum. You're not trying to burn down the world, but we've been forced into these really extremes and echoing chambers that just get people to not think anymore about reality. You want to build a greenhouse. Well, how are you going to heat it? Oh, no, I'm going to use solar panels in the middle of winter. That's what I did. Yeah, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Climate locale. Speaking of that, how like these horticubes here.
When I first chose, I was looking at rock wool, and I was like, well, kind of they have harvest stuff and their pH impacting and all that kind of stuff. So I actually did some searching and did some testing, and we ended up going with a company, Oasis. They're called Oasis Horticubes, and that's what you saw. So in our towers, we have these guys here, and you get a whole lot of them. This is a case with a whole lot in it, but they're really cheap, and they're biodegradable as well. So Rockwool is going to last a little bit longer than these guys. So you can take these out, throw them in your compost pile, and they're going to decompose, but they don't really impact your pH. And they do good at retaining water, but not too much. They're kind of like little sponges, and they have the hole in the middle of it, like you saw when you're putting the stuff in the tower. So it's easy to put the seeds down in there. But you're talking about one of your viewers asking, well, what if we don't have these? What can we use other things in the tower? Well, our tower is designed to use standard 2-inch net pots. And all you have to do, like coco coir is a decent substitute, but what you want to do is get your coco coir in a bucket and let it expand. Usually it comes in big package bales, and you have to rehydrate it. You want to let it rehydrate first, and then you can use some coco coir and put it in there. The problem with coco coir is that eventually it'll flake off and get into the system. And when you're using aeroponics, aeroponics is great because you get 15% more yield and 50% faster growing. So like 30% more by using just aeroponics above hydroponics. And but if you get the trade-off is you need to keep your system clean. So if you start getting a whole bunch of coco coir falling into your system, then you need to clean it more often. And we've put 2 filters on the system to help with that. But you could substitute other things. You could get peat moss. You could get moss. You could go out and get, what is it? I think it's called old man's beard. from the forest, and you could wrap it up in a little ball and put your seed in that, and it should hold water enough too. So yeah, there's alternatives that you could do. I haven't tested a lot of those. We got to this point, we're very satisfied, but in theory, you could choose other things. And we were talking about the sun earlier as well with the solar, but I get this question a lot too. Is like, what happens when you're doing aeroponics and the power goes out? What do you do? Well, for our tower, we included a manual foot pump just in case. And I've done this. Is your tower can go about 8 hours without having water, and everything will still live, but it'll start to wilt. It'll start to look really sad. So if you go out there every few hours during a power outage and do a manual foot pump, you're going to keep things alive. That's not where you want to be. So then you're talking about, like, can you connect it to a generator? As long as it's 60 hertz, yeah, you can connect it straight to a 120 volt 60 hertz generator. And pretty much, if you're in the US, that's pretty much every generator that you have, with few exceptions. If you're in the UK, or the rest of the planet uses 220 volts, 240 volts at, I think it's 50 hertz, you're going to need an inverter that takes you at the current tower to the 120 volts at 60 hertz. But you can definitely connect it to a generator, no problem. And if you have a solar generator, on the battery bank, you can definitely connect it to it. The tower's 120 volts at, 3 to 5 amps max. So it's pretty low power, and that's when the lights are on. And if you're in emergency mode, you could, drop it down into, what we call emergency mode, and you just basically life support it, keep it alive during your power outage. But yeah, those are all things you can do. And then if your power does go out, one of the reasons we have an Android device is because it has its own battery. So all your settings and everything are all stored on that Android device, and it can stay on for like 8 hours without anything going on with it. So it will have all your settings, and even if it goes out, all your settings are still stored on there. So all you have to do is get power back to the tower, hit go, and it'll just pick up where it left off. Pretty easy to use.
And it's funny you mention that, is because now the administration is talking about outlawing or reducing your ability to even have a generator, and the washing machines and the water heaters. So where's it going to go from here? I mean, if you can already, I'm not saying that you might have an answer, but you can see the trajectory it's going, where they're going to be outlawing generators. Now, that is a lifeline for so many people, especially, I have some friends in Florida. They use them almost every year because the power goes out down there.
You have to. We do the same thing, David. Yeah, we just had the power. It's middle of summer, and we just had the power go out yesterday. It flashed off, came back on a little bit later. In the winter, of course, we have big storms. If you're out west here, fires. Especially as we get deeper into the summer. We've actually received our first. It was spooky. It was spooky weird, not like spooky. We got an automated call from our power company. And we wanted to let you know that we're going to turn the power off if there's a big wildfire. And that's the first time I've ever had that. And of course, I'm a man. I want people to be safe. And I was in the fire department. If you have energized lines, and they're falling during the middle, yeah, we should turn power off. I mean, that makes sense. But when we look at California and stuff that was done down there over the last few years, I mean, one of our, previous, cohorts, Ice Age farmer, he was out there and they were turning power off just to turn it off, just like, oh, the winds are high, let's turn it off because we haven't taken care of the grid and we might spark a wildfire. So I remember he did some videos where it was like, all the ice cream in the stores, they were giving it away, all the fresh food, they were giving it away because it was all just going bad because they ran out of fuel for their generators. And now we see them coming after us on the generator front. So you're taking away natural gas stoves, you're taking away natural gas for heating, you're taking away our ability to burn biofuel because that's, bad for the environment. And you're making it where we can't run generators to take care of ourselves. What about I hate heat. But there's people who, if you let them get too hot, they will die. So then what that means is you have to be forced into these places where they control you. And like, no way, man, we've got to, be together in community. And we talk about the Bible and what it says about this. I think the thing that comes to my mind is the beast system in Revelation. It's chapter 13, and it talks about the rise of this system that is going to be so big that people are going to say, how do you even fight this? And I'm saying that. How do you fight the system that's out there right now? They control all the media, and if you say too much, you're censored, you lose your job. ESG scores, we're seeing that all happen right now. That's the rise of the beast system. And it says flat out, in fact, they have it up here. It says it causes both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. Oh, we're seeing that happen. Anyone see the Amazon palm readers now?
Yeah, right. They want to do your veins or something.
Yeah, in Sweden, they're putting the RFID tag, inside.
I'll pass, thanks.
The hand.
For
Yeah,
the record,
exactly.
I do not and will not submit to that. For the record, it's my sentient choice. No is my answer.
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
should be everybody's answer too.
It should
our
be.
choice. Literally, it's our choice. If just enough people said no, then the uptake rate's never going to be high enough for them to implement anything. That's why central bank digital currency was a complete failure in Nigeria on the rollout.
Yep.
Less than 3% of the people took part in it. So then instantly they had to switch tack and then go in a different direction. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're seeing, it says that so that you're going to take this mark, so that nobody can buy or sell unless they have the mark. And what you just said is exactly, you're going to be brought to a point where you make a conscientious decision. And that decision is going to include two things. One is going to include your comfort. And two, it's going to be something that says you have to submit and admit that this thing that you're doing is more important in your life than anything else. Let me translate that. You're going to have to renounce any belief in something else, including Jesus. So if you're going to get to that point, we all are. And like what you said, Dave, my choice is no. Absolutely not. That's too far. But we are seeing it. It is happening right in front of us. And that's another reason why people need to grow your own food. Second economy. You need to be out there working with other people like yourselves, figuring out where you're going to get your information from, figuring out how you're going to get medicine, and figuring out how you're going to grow your own food and be safe. Because what's coming, this is another one of those, I just don't understand what's going on. It's literally written down. It's the number one selling book of all time. I was thinking of this the other day, is who won the Super Bowl 5 years ago? What was the number one selling book from 10 years ago? Do you remember or how physics and history books have changed, yet the Bible remains pretty much unchanged for over 2,000 years? And there's lots of little debates about little changes and all those things, but the essence of it has not changed. That's unheard of. You don't get that unless there's something bigger holding that thing together. And we're seeing what was written down there. It's just all coming to life. So I'll yield there.
Yeah, the thing for me is, I had a conversation with Christy Lay, who was on her program last week, and I was trying to explain that, this world that we're in now is a non-salvageable world based on the events we're about and are heading into as we speak, and have already, experienced several of them. These extremes that are coming, these electromagnetic effects or gravitational effects that are inbound for 2024. And then subsequently after that, the Earth will be out in front of the solar system by itself with all gravitational bodies behind us. You would think after COVID and the complete destruction of the global economy, we would be having sort of a Manhattan Project, for a better term, to get the world back on track, to restart the systems, to get everybody working again, and get the mom and pops up and running. But the complete opposite is happening. There's a Manhattan Project to deconstruct our world further and not repair a single thing for infrastructure, which means to me, they're verifying that it's non-salvageable. So we'll go through the event, and whatever's left at that point after, somewhere around 2030-ish, the rebuild will begin. Because I understand too that a lot of things, especially in the top 2 miles of the crust, are going to start rifting, morphing, breaking, pulling, tugging. You're going to watch bridges come apart right off the banks of the river as it pulls, and fiber optic cables, conduit, gas pipelines, oil pipelines. It's all going to start fracturing and rifting. And, a lot of these factory fires that I'm seeing now, I'm just wondering, the devil's advocate here, no pun intended, but I'm wondering if there was not some sort of earthly pull and tug which caused a rift and the insulation break on some of those wires that caused the shorts that then started those fires in the factories. Because it would be great to play into the hands of those that look deeper into events to say, oh, all these factories are burning on purpose. Or would it be, oh, by the way, you know, under the crust already, it's already rifting enough where a lot of our electrical infrastructure is being greatly affected with short outs and factory fires just because the conduits are breaking underground already. And we don't really want to report that in the news because I see nothing getting repaired. I'm seeing everything getting destroyed further. And now they want to bring us into this climate religion thing, which is,
oh yeah,
you earth killer.
yeah.
I just
That's
can't
another
believe how all this overlaps, and it's not really that. No, it's just, you know, keep going about paying your taxes and getting ready for retirement in some 60 years or something
Yeah, I mean that
for younger people.
Yeah. So a few things there. One, there's a lot of disturbances that are going on naturally right now. When I see
Huge
earthquakes,
amounts, huge.
yeah, you know, you're seeing them go up. That's another one of the warnings, you know, is that there's going to be more and more earthquakes. And Jesus said these are birth pains. And that's an analogy there of these things. They're going to become more frequent and they're going to become larger in the amount of damage that they create. And so definitely, certainly I haven't thought about what you pointed out there, but that definitely could be. And it's just things are breaking apart and we're not fixing them because their goal is to tear it all down. And it talks about it is, you know, in Revelation 13 again, is the beast system. It rises up out of something. It's like a phoenix, you know, essentially is they got to rebuild another empire that's going to come out of existing ones. So something's got to fail. And we're seeing those things happen. And you mentioned another thing there about people worshiping the creation. And that's where I had it actually. It's in Romans here.
Yeah, you had that, you know, that U verse is really interesting thing. I wonder if you put the word hail inside, like HAIL, because the predictions were of the grand solar minimum. If the hail is going to reach bowling ball size, or at least something larger than grapefruit,
that's
larger
in
than
Revelation.
watermelons.
Yeah,
that's what happened during the spore minimum. It crushed villages to the point of wooden villages disappeared in the mud after the hailstorms.
Well, and so I'll pull that
crazy
up,
as that sounds.
And that's exactly, it sounds crazy that all this stuff could just be written down and here it is and we're seeing it happen. And then look at this, what it says. Therefore, God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. Do we see that at all today? Because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the creator. In some versions, you know, there's different interpretations of the original Hebrew and Greek. This was originally written in Greek. So this is where some people get confused. They're like, oh, these different versions of the Bible. No, it's actually, they are interpreting these things, but your job as a Christian is to read all of them, unless you want to go back to the original Greek.
The Aramaic. Yeah, I'd like to see what the Aramaic version of that exact word from Aramaic would have been.
Yeah, and there, so like the Blue Letter Bible, and there's a lot of tools that allow you to go do that. I didn't have that all ready today. I go do that another day. But a lot of these is the creation is another one.
That's a better interpretation of it.
And are we seeing that? You mentioned it's like worship the earth, save the planet. Hey, listen, our God created us to be in the garden and to take care of it, and we screwed it up. We should be taking care of the planet. That doesn't mean we kill people to save the planet, because people are more valuable than the planet, but you need both. So, you know, we're supposed to be stewards. We're not doing a good job of that either. But this extreme thing that we're seeing come up here is people going, well, you've got to turn on, like what you said, we're taking all this land and we're going to make it to you can't grow food on it. Okay, well, you're going to kill a bunch of people. Well, we don't care because it's all about the planet. You know, you heard Kamala Harris come out and say, you know, we need to reduce
population. She misspoke. Yeah. Come on, Jeff. She misspoke.
I know.
You don't believe it.
It was pollution.
You see, you're an earth killer. You don't believe it was pollution.
That's it. And you know, of course, I'm horrible because I don't believe it. But the interesting thing is, how did the crowd react when she said that?
They applauded.
They applauded. To applause. This is a lie. They have, and God says in the end, he'll turn them over to a great delusion. And people are delusional right now. That's why it doesn't make sense. It's because what you're seeing is a world that has gone nuts. Basically, God is sitting there like a parent. He's the best parent ever. And he's like, all right, you don't want to listen to me? Go do it your way. Let's see how it works. And we've been doing that for 2,000 years and it ain't working. And he finally really got out of the way. But you brought up
yeah, you could put in hail, and I'll make a comment while that gets typed in. I'm just curious what comes up. The train wrecks. This is from an insurance person I know, and also somebody who is involved in the grains, because they're heavy onto the CO2 pipeline debacle right now, where they're trying to have private corporations use eminent domain to take land, and it's not even public utility, which is like once that happens and it becomes law where they can do that, then you really will own nothing, because any company can come in anywhere and say,
and just
we
take
need this land for this purpose, and you got no rights whatsoever for your land. But the newest thing is train wrecks. There's been a lot of train derailments as of late, as we've heard. And again, I'll bring it back to, I'm going to go two directions. One direction is, was that an earth crust displacement event of the top 2 miles of the crust as we come into these electromagnetic effects that rifted and pulled and tugged, even if it's just inches or several feet, that ripped the rails from the last time somebody passed? So within that 2 hours or 20 minutes that there was an event electromagnetically that pulled that apart and nobody noticed it? Or is it on purpose? And as was explained to the insurance carrier here, they're going to be trying to condemn the land. Once there's a train derailment with a hazardous substance on it, at that point, legally, they're allowed to condemn the land. Now, if you condemn the land, this is where it gets into splitting the hair. Let's say you own 1,000 acres. Trains way over on the back quarter, and the spill only affected like 5 acres of the entire 1,000 acres. Well, what these companies are trying to have now, insurance companies do, is condemn the land, all of it, so they can come in and get it under par value. So this is another sneaky trick that's being used. So if there's a train derailment, and it could be one car out of like 200 that has a toxic substance on it, it was in that train. And again, how do you define, well, if on a broad brushstroke, hey, that train had a chemical substance on it, it landed on your land, we're going to condemn the land.
Yep.
And, are they, this is where it gets into the fine tuning. Is it really the 5 acres or 10 acres on the back, 1,000 over there that got affected? Or are you taking the entire farm that goes 1.5 miles in this direction where the breezes were still clean and the birds are still chirping? This is where it's going to. Now, please understand, this is a way that they're trying to take the land from farmers as we speak today, right now.
Yeah. I mean, Norway, everything going over there. And we're seeing it here in the United States. It's starting to happen as well. And my mom used to be a right-of-way agent, and she was talking about eminent domain and how it's used, bring power poles in, mostly for the betterment of society. But what we're seeing is the combination of, you hear it all the time, public-private partnerships, right? Well, that is just a way that they can do things without going to Congress, in our case, without going to your government, because they can have the companies do things for the company's private good. But when these guys are in bed with each other like this, it's not a good combination, but they're telling you it is. And they could do stuff like, well, you know what? Walmart needs to have a new store here in town. Well, hey, Mr. Government, I've been lobbying you and I've taken you out to dinner, and I know your daughter's birthday and we go golfing all the time. It'd be great if you could just say that that's now eminent domain because progress. And they're definitely going to be misusing that. That is going to be a huge, huge thing that they're going to be taking advantage of. I'm still looking up your stuff here. It's in Revelation. It talks, I think it's one of the trumpets. I'm just trying to get that verse for you.
Yeah, because and again, the trumpets, people are hearing these strange trumpet sounds around the world. And is that a Paleozoic type of electromagnetic release in the crust of sorts? Because, it's sort of similar, but it's a little bit different in the tone of it. The frequency of it's a little bit different at times. Sometimes it's a very low electron. Other times it's a high squealy type of trumpet. So, I mean, the frequency in itself on that range of what you could see there. So if you're thinking about mineral constituents in the crust, and if they were push tugged or electromagnetically induced some way, they could have a frequency associated with that and a sound release of whatever would cause that. Now, I'm not the expert on that. There's somebody out there that is. So I would love to talk to you and get way more information. If you understand how a mineral substrate can be pushed with frequency or electromagnetism together, coupling that could release a sound wave, I'm all ears.
Yeah, interesting thing you brought that up. So I have the verse up on the screen here. People want to look at it, but it is one of the last bowls of God's.
Revelation 16.
It's one of the bowls. Yeah. So Revelation 16:21, and great hailstones, about 100 pounds each, fell from heaven on people, and they cursed God for the plague of hail. So yeah, you're definitely going to be seeing some of that hail. Hopefully not. Everybody get on the Jesus train because you get out of here for all this stuff, which is debated as well. But I'm a believer in, they're setting us up. I'll say this real fast because there's just so much to unpack here. Is they're setting everybody up for a disappearance event. They're setting that's why you're seeing so many talking points about UFOs right now. And even in Congress this week, the UFO hearings that are going on, in my humble opinion, it is the perfect setup for what Christians call the rapture, or raptura in Latin is the word that if you look up
reptilian,
in the original.
bro. I'm not getting
No,
craft with
no
reptilians.
reptilians, no lizard people. Yeah, no, this is a great taking away. An extraction is what it is. And it's debated in Christian theology, but what it basically says is that God, just like he did with with Israel when he took them out of Egypt, he protected them from the plagues of Egypt, which included hail back then too. And he took them out of it. He protected them from that. So there's a correlation to what's going to happen in the future here, is that these things are going to start to happen, but there's potentially this really big event where a lot of people disappear. Well, what are they talking about? What are people worried about? Alien abduction. How long have you heard about alien abduction? I mean, yeah, I love the X-Files like everybody else, but it was talked about a long time. And you're seeing connections between some of the people who made those movies and the CIA now is starting to happen. And you're like, wait a second, what's going on? I can't believe that. That's crazy. I didn't know about Project Bluebeam, but there's all this stuff that's out there about it. And I read up on it, and I was in the intelligence organization. I was in that apparatus. And there's stuff that's being done to us as humans right now that I was taught how to do when I was in the Air Force. We call it information operations, and part of information operations is PSYOP, or massive deception campaigns. So when I heard about Project Bluebeam and what was going on with that, is like, dude, this is a huge PSYOP. It's a huge IO event. And we're seeing that happen right now.
I noticed one sentence there. I hate to interrupt your thought, but there was a sentence right prior to the hail that really made sense to me. Okay, so I'm going to take you back to Aotearoa, which is New Zealand for English words there. The creation stories of Aotearoa, or New Zealand, was the great God pulled with a fishing rod and the mountains rose out of the ocean and then created what you know as Aotearoa today. That is the opposite of that. So they're talking about land subsistence right there. Now, the creation stories of New Zealand means that the land rose out of the ocean, literally rose out of the ocean as the crust, buoyed out somewhere, pushed out what would have been underwater. The actual land mass raised some miles out of the sea. But if you look right there where it says, and every island fled away and no more mountains were to be found, that's land subsistence. They're talking literally about a stopping of the planet at some sort of point there. And then either it reverses what the Chinese talked about. So many legends and myths and stories talk about the sun rising in a different direction. It used to rise from the west.
Revelation talks about it stopping. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what that is. When it stops at that point, without that gravitational force, the Earth's going to come back in on itself. And these oceans are going to they're not going to flood. The land is literally going to sink beneath. That's exactly what that is. But then somewhere in the inverse, there's going to be another area of the planet where lands literally rise miles out of the ocean, and you start to look at that. I mean, look over in New Zealand. I mean, or Aotearoa. I mean, how tall are the tallest peaks there?
Yeah.
In addition to how many thousands of feet or miles it was beneath the sea, we're talking like anywhere from 2 to 5 miles of a change of where the crust would sit in terms of sea level. That's insane.
There were so many things that I'm starting to learn about history, and I hated history when I was a kid. And I can only encourage you now, if you're young, to start studying history, because as you get older, it becomes really darn important, especially these days. And how much of our history has been manipulated and changed is the really horrible travesty. But so you want to get some books before you can't do it anymore. But even Genesis, like, people try to discredit the creation account in Genesis, and I was one of them. Like, oh no, it's millions of years. But there's actually real science that's done out there that contradicts the millionaire story, even with the dinosaurs, and it's very profound. It's very, very convincing, and not in the I'm just trying to, believe what I want to believe way. I'm talking like, how can you dispute this? It's like, this is right in front of you. This is the real thing. You can prove it. You can touch it. You can see it. I mean, so there's creation events, the flood, how God created everything. And back to the point you made that got me started is, how did God create everything? He spoke it into existence, vibration. And what are we seeing? The electric universe, all these things we're seeing, it's all based off of movement at a very low level. Resonance frequencies, frequencies of life, all that stuff. It is all how God actually created it. He said, the word says, I spoke it, and he spoke it into existence. God said, let there be light. God said, let there be vegetables. God said, let there be animals. He said it. And I've always thought, well, that's very interesting, but I think it has a lot more profound meaning than what we think, is because we're seeing, even with quantum mechanics, 0 point energy, right? That's not woo-woo, is what, if you aren't familiar with 0 point energy, for the watchers here, and I know you are, David, but is when you take a substance and you reduce its heat all the way down to 0 Kelvin, meaning there's absolutely no heat energy, you should have no movement, because movement is generated by heat. That's how the physics works at that level. So what we see, though, is when we bring everything to 0, we remove all heat. There's no heat in it at all. It's still moving.
Mm-hmm.
It's still vibrating. And that's what we call 0 point energy. And you can get into some really crazy quantum mechanics of what's going on at that point. But the bottom line is, it's all doing this, just like the sound waves that are coming out of my mouth. And you could see a frequency for each one of the atomic particles, and you can see a frequency for each of us, because we're all vibrating. The table is vibrating so fast that I can't put my hand through it. That is what stops it. And electromagnetism and all those things are there as well. But essentially, it's all that movement. It's amazing, but that was written down in the book that is pretty old. So if you actually look at physics, I've done this. It's actually really cool. Look at the Bible from a physicist standpoint. The flood, the mountains, everything, the creation, and everything that we see, like, there's a reason why there's a global flood in pretty much every culture. It actually happened. And what happened and where all that water went, like, a lot of people criticize it. Like, if there was a global flood and the Bible says there was, well, where'd the water go? Well, about 3-4 years ago, NASA did this whole underground radar thing. And guess what? There's more water under the surface of the earth than there is on top of it. So, like, it's all just written there.
And what if there was an expansion event and that actually allowed for that water too? Because I've seen 3 times as much water under the earth as there is on all the oceans, rivers, streams, whatever lakes combined on the surface.
Yeah. He says in the flood account for Noah, is like, and God said he opened the fountains of the deep, right? Or where's the deep? That's in the earth. Okay. And there was some fountains. So all the water came up. And so you could see something like an earthquake or a fissure or a fracture or something where these things opened, and all this extra water, which makes sense. There's pressure on top of it. So that pressure pushes down like a sponge. You press it in and the water shoots up. And you see all that. And then you see there's potentially all the continental movements, right? Catastrophism. And you could see that potentially all the mountains and the continents were all moving because of this water shift. I mean, there's chances that some of the places that we're living right now aren't actually the places that were originally, that because they floated, moved, the water pushed them to different spots. I mean, that's not a biblical statement. That's just Jeff sitting here going, wow, you kind of have to start questioning everything, but there's potential that these things could have happened. So when someone just tells you this is the absolute fact, on the matter, I'm like, I'll tell you with like Revelation, all those things, it's debated. That's why I said that. There's a lot of debate about what I'm saying here, but there's some fundamental things that we look for as far as patterns go. And so I guess what I'll shut up after this, David, is you don't have to believe every single word, but if you just zoom out and look at patterns, which is something that I did, I'll pull this up on the screen here. I am a big pattern guy. The way my brain works is I look for dots. I look for connections. My cousin came here. We spent a weekend. We're just having just guy time, and we're like, let's open up. We did a weird thing. We're like, let's open up the Bible and work backwards, right? Let's drop all pretenses and let's just write it down like a project manager would. Like, what you do if you're a project manager, you're like, I want to build a home. You start with what the home looks like and you work backwards to figure out all the stuff that you have to put into it as far as timelines go, and how much you're going to spend and all of that. So we did that. We started in the back and we worked our way from right to left, and we wrote it all down, which this is a huge eye chart. But interesting thing, you look at the patterns, right? Look, the deception, wars and rumors of wars, nation versus nation, kingdom versus kingdom, earthquakes. Like, these are all really big themes that are actually occurring. So you could get lost in the details, which a lot of people do. But if you just step back, falling away from the faith, we're seeing that. Jerusalem being surrounded by enemies, and an interesting one, Russia is going to be pulled out of Russia, and they're going to get sucked into a war in the Middle East with Israel. And we're starting to see those, Iran starting to kind of partner up with Russia.
I see 2024 there and 2026 at the very top, just below where it says 80 years or just above the 2000 years. Because those are significant dates for me, October of 2024 and then April of 2025. And that fits like squarely in that window you have right there. Because my two biggest events that I can see on the radar, electromagnetic perturbation, anomaly, whatever you like to call it, that'll occur October 23rd at its apex in 2024. And then the earth swings in front of the sun. And every gravitational body in the entire solar system is behind us for those matter of months until we swing back around the sun. That's April of 2025. So I see two dates of mine that line up squarely in your 2024.5, which I would think would be May, maybe, into 2026 May.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's one of the reasons I want to bring it up, David, is you were talking, I think it was one of your previous episodes where you're talking about everything lining up. And I don't study or follow those things. I barely have enough time to do my own Bible study, let alone go out and do the stuff that you do, which is why I plug your channel. Hey, like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you get notified. But if you start looking at these patterns, 2030 is really starting to be a very interesting year. And for Christians, if you subtract 7 years from that, you get 2023, where we're at right now, which is kind of things starting to kick off. And nobody knows the day or hour of all these things that are happening. So you see a lot of question marks that I have on here. I don't know any dates. What I'm doing is looking for patterns. And if we look at the Jewish calendar, we look at Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets, it occurs in fall. Now, the times and dates have been changed, so we don't really know how that all lines up anymore. But the stuff that you just brought up, fall. That's fall. We're seeing that. And then next year in 2024, in October, I think it is, the United Nations is getting together to talk about this massive treaty. I think it's World Health Organization, is that whole thing they're doing, but they're trying to bring everybody under the United Nations umbrella. That's the beast system, first of all, because Satan is given the authority to rule over the entire planet, one world government with a one world religion, which we're seeing. The Pope, go check him out. I just made all the Catholics mad, but if you're a believer in Christ, just go check him out and you'll see how he's talking about bringing Islam, Judaism, and Catholicism together. That's potentially false prophet type of stuff that's going on. And we see all this happening next year. There's going to be this potential covenant with many, which is spoken about in Daniel. And there's people who are so much better than I am at this. I'm a young pup in these things, and they could talk circles around me. But big picture, these timelines, we're seeing a convergence, whether it be planetary, timeline, political, anything. We're seeing a convergence to something that's happening in the next decade. And like you mentioned earlier, like, we thought these things would take time, but they're going faster. They're happening like birth pains. It's coming faster and faster and faster. And you just figure out what's the new normal. And all of a sudden there's another change, right? And now it's just happening so quick we can't even keep up with it, like AI.
No, that sixth seal right there in the center, down where it says super locust there. Super earthquakes, the stars fall, and the sky vanishes. Now, if you go back through history, there's been several chapters of history after massive earthquakes. I think Mount Lockheed was one of the best recorded examples of it. Like the moon didn't shine for months. In some other areas too, the moon was obscured for weeks where it just completely disappeared. Well, obviously there's going to be things in the sky and different types of gases that would obscure that view. Yeah. But it's well documented that after massive eruptions across the planet, whatever time frame that would be back in the past, the sky vanishes. Literally, the stars disappear from view, and the moon at points totally disappears as well. Well, you got an interference from gases and just straight up ash and different kind of, opaqueness and thing. This is well recorded going back the last 2,000 years. I think it's happened 3 times where the moon has completely disappeared for weeks on end after volcanic eruptions. That's a easy one to explain there. Every mountain and island moved again. If you were going to have sort of a rotational, let's say, anomaly with the planet, then things would absolutely move.
Yeah, we're seeing magnetic pole shift and all that.
Yeah,
and we don't know
magnetic wandering.
Yep, we don't know the impact. I mean, we're all trying to figure it out as we watch the scientists and so-called experts try to do it. But there's potential catastrophic events of the past that you're going to know more about than I do, where you see major shifts that could result in stuff that we would not normally think is normal. I mean, there's one show, it's called Is Genesis History? And they start off with a really profound trick. They have a person, if you're from Washington State, where I'm at, we all know about Mount St. Helens, and they go to this spot, and the opening shot is just beautiful. What they do is they're like, here I am on this massive landscape, and I'm walking through, and it looks like I'm on the surface of Mars. And he says, to the camera, he's like, how long do you think it took for this to be formed geologically? And of course, the first response, millions of years, all that erosion had to happen, and ice age and all this stuff melting. He's like, what if I told you if this happened in a single day? Right. And then he shows the explosion of Mount St. Helens and all the lahars and all the mud flows and everything, and how it just cut everything. But the thing is, humans, we're used to small change. The way that we're kind of wired, I would argue, is we're used to being able to say 1 + 1 = 2. Now, maybe I could do something like 2 × 2 = 4, and I can but really I'm just forecasting out on a very straight line. But what happens when it's a step function change? It's just our brain has a hard time understanding that our entire world can change in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye. And that is catastrophism in Jeff Raymond speak. And when we look at stuff like what you're talking about, and the mountains and stuff being pulled up and pushed down and moved and all this, that all could happen, which would explain a lot of the things that have been written about that are coming up. And I think another interesting thing about that 6th seal is it talks about all the rich people. They all go to the mountains and hide. They all go to caves and hide. Has anybody been seeing like a big uptick in people building bunkers? Like really rich people, I don't know, maybe New Zealand, having a whole bunch of underground stuff. Like, kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'll end up here because we've been going for about an hour. And everybody out there, thank you for staying with us. We're going to do these talks pretty regular. And 535 AD is the closest I can get you to 6th seal occurring again. Now, 535, 536, 537 AD, there were 3 massive eruptions on the planet, and they called it the era of poisoned air, where literally with those 3 massive eruptions, they know for sure one was on the equator. And again, it's very murky the further you go back and past. They can't really even identify where these 3, what you would consider right now, VEI 8 or 7 eruptions, and they only know where one of them was out of the 3 that went off. It's staggering how little we know about such large events in the past. So anyway, I do thank you for your time,
Good
Jeff.
question. Yeah, thank you for having me, as always.
Until next time, bye for now.